Another example of engagement that I want to share, so we're trying to connect, I'm connecting engagement with deep learning. So we're trying to say to ourselves, what is it that's going to engage kids, that'll encourage them to focus on the mathematics that I'm wanting to focus on today. Here's the context. So I was this was a grade 2 classroom, and I talked about a holiday I'd been on the week before. So we'd had a family holiday and we'd been to the beach, and I was talking about the fact that we were walking along the beach and we came across a little creek, and we were trying to get somewhere to view the sunset, because people had said if you get there at this time when the sun sets, it's just fantastic. But we had this creek we had to cross running into the sea, and we were all trying to work out, okay, do we need to take our shoes and socks off and paddle through, or can we jump it? And so the context I was using with the students was, how big a creek could you jump? And so that was the way into it. And I drew a chalk line on the carpet and then called for a volunteer, and this is Angelique. And Angelique put a mark that would show the width of the creek that she thought she could jump. And then we thought, well, let's give it a go. Let's see if you can jump a creek of that size. So here she is, she's all set, she bends down, flies through the air, and unfortunately, she didn't quite make it. And we talked about the fact now Angelique would get her toes wet. So that was a bit of a problem. But then the question was then posed. There was another boy, Christian, who was quite tall, and he was really keen to demonstrate that he could jump that creek. So we let him do that. But the challenge for the kids was they were going to go outside with a piece of chalk, and they had to and a streamer, and they had to come back inside for each of the pair. They worked together, but each person had to come in and show a length of streamer that was the width of the creek, the biggest creek that they could jump. So that was their task. Our focus was on measurement, not surprisingly, for that particular day. But we did need a bit of a discussion about, okay, if we're going to have a streamer, what are we actually measuring? We're actually wanting to measure at right angles, not at a diagonal, and we go from where to where. So once we'd sorted all of that out, we're then in a position to go outside, working in pairs, and I can assure you no children were harmed in the filming of this. He's flying through the air there, but they worked together in pairs. And then they came, once they'd done their various measuring, and you can see the different chalk marks happening there. Once they'd had their streamer, they came back inside. And one of the things I throw in her, in terms of disposition, one of the powers of group work, we often feel like that when we do mathematics tasks. At least I'm not the only fool. But then they came back inside and they did some comparison between their sizes of their creeks. And then we lined them up. We talked about how we make comparisons in length, the fact that they all have to start at the same point and so on. We established that. Someone said, well, how wide is the creek? And that gave us the opportunity to look at more formal units. And how do you interpret a wooden ruler, particularly? How do you interpret a wooden ruler where it's got that little bit on the end? How do we deal with that? So all sorts of opportunities to discuss the principles of measurement as we went along. And then we also talked about, can anyone jump across a creek that's wider than they are tall? And we did have a couple of kids in the class. Particularly this little girl was really pleased with herself because she was the shortest in the class, but she could actually jump a creek that was bigger than her. So our focus was measurement, but we're engaging with a particular context that we hope is of interest to students, because we know how important engagement is. And so many kids who will say, I hate maths, or adults who will say, I was never any good at maths. And so that engagement, that positive disposition is so important. But we want to be doing worthwhile mathematics as well.